Pleasure to introduce Rodrigo Pimentel, who is talking to us about a project on foreign experiences and whether they make us wiser. Rodrigo, go ahead.
All right, thank you, Dr. Kraus, for the introduction. So like Dr. Kraus said, my name is Rodrigo Pimentel. I'm part of the SPUR 2022 cohort. Today, I'll walk you through my project I did during the summer, titled The Foreign Experiences Make Us Wiser. This project was supervised by Dr. Frankie Kung, and in collaboration with colleagues from his lab. They helped from start to finish in completion of my first fully independent research project. Come on, there we go. Everyone wants to be wiser. Some of us here will spend years in school, thousands of dollars to do this. Even today, we're gathered to learn more about the work conducted in SPUR. The key here is to learn more, to become wiser. And although wisdom is universally cherished, its definition varies extensively, even in the literature. If I were to ask you your definition of wisdom, it would likely be very different from the one of the next person. Here, we're going to conceptualize wisdom as a situation-dependent context. This was first described by Brienza et al. In 2018, when you put yourself in a difficult situation that you had with another person, wisdom is the ability to engage in certain reasoning acts that promote balance of interest and well-being for both parties. This is what we're going to call wise reasoning. Now, wise reasoning can be characterized along 5 different facets, again described by Brienza et al. In 2018. One of them, humility, recognizing the limits of your own knowledge. Observer's viewpoint, like looking at the bigger picture, or perspective taking, trying to understand situations from multiple angles. Evolving situations, which is accommodating for changes as they unfold, and a search for compromise, which is integrating different interests in the resolution of a conflict. Aside from the challenge of defining wisdom, a central question remains: where does wisdom come from? We've all wondered at one time how we can get wiser. Researchers have examined things like adversity and age in the study of wisdom, adversity and age. However, they found no significant correlations even in longitudinal studies. Others, however, have found that professional leadership experience, those with that experience are more likely than their peers to reason wisely at work. Despite these varied results, it is important to keep in mind that it is generally accepted experiential and situational factors shape wisdom. But less is known about the cultural context that shape wisdom. This is where the idea of this project came about. Dr. Kung and I wondered how people like us, having experienced different cultures in our lives, may be more or less likely to reason wisely. So after I familiarized myself with wisdom research, eventually I landed on the main research question. Are multicultural experiences related to wise reasoning? After all, we reason that by immersing individuals in new situations and new and varied perspectives, these multicultural experiences could be that cultural context that we're missing in the development of wisdom. But what exactly are multicultural experiences, and why may these experiences be related to wise reasoning? A good definition of multicultural experience is exposure to or interactions with elements of members from a different culture. Notice they make a distinction between exposure, that means when a person observes without interaction. So for example, observing different cultures' traditions, their religious practices, trying different cuisines, watching foreign movies or videos. And they make the distinction from interaction. Interaction requires a verbal or non-verbal communication and reciprocal actions, like corresponding online, working, or socializing with people from foreign cultures. We will come back to this distinction later, but we also focused on another source of multicultural experiences, and this is foreign travel experience. But the question is, why may these multicultural experiences be related to wise reasoning? Let's think back to the 5 facets of wise reasoning we described earlier. Maybe these cultural experiences let us recognize ways of doing things or preconceived notions that may be wrong. This is developing our intellectual humility. Or they may offer new ways of thinking or different points of views on issues we didn't have before, fostering our different perspective taking. or because they force us to adjust and find a common ground of understanding, they allow us to be better at searching for compromise. With these reasonings in mind, we hypothesize that these past multicultural experiences and foreign travel exposure will be positively related to individuals' level of wise reasoning. After some planning, we pre-registered the study, submitted for our peer review, and once we got approved, we moved on to collecting the sample. A total of 389 adult participants from the United States were recruited through Prolific, and then they completed an online survey using Qualtrics. Let's move on to what that survey consisted of. This survey focused on 3 different things: past multicultural experience, foreign travel, and wise reasoning. To measure past multicultural experience, we use 2 scales. Multicultural Experience Questionnaire, developed by Narvaez et al. This is a general multicultural experiences. It consisted of 9 items. So it could be as general as, I correspond currently with people from other countries. But we also used another scale, a newer scale in 2018, developed by Eitug et al., which let us measure multicultural exposure and interaction separately, so we can parse out the effects on wisdom. 6 multicultural exposure items, like expose myself to foreign media, and 4 multicultural interaction items, like I talk to people from different cultures. So that's multicultural experience. But to measure foreign travel, we asked 2 simple questions: the breadth, meaning the number of countries, and the depth, meaning the number of weeks that you spend traveling abroad. This is similar to a study by Chow et al. In 2013. And as I mentioned earlier, we used a situation-sensitive measure of wisdom. This is called the Situated Wise Reasoning Scale. It was developed by Brienza et al. In 2018, like I mentioned before. And this basically consists of an event reconstruction technique where participants are asked to recall a recent difficult situation with another person and rate the extent to which they engage in certain reasoning acts, those reasoning acts I mentioned earlier. There were 21 items in total, and an example of a reasoning act could be, I thought about the things both parties may have in common. This is an example of perspective taking. So to summarize, there are 6 scores that we're concerned about: wise reasoning score, the more general MEQ score, the multicultural exposure items, the multicultural interaction items, and the breadth and depth of foreign travel. And on the right here, we just see the mean and the standard deviations of these variables. But recall our hypothesis. Past multicultural experience and foreign travel are positively related to wise reasoning. To test if this relationship actually exists, our next step was to take bivariate correlations between each of these variables and wise reasoning scores. So what do we find? Is wisdom related to multicultural experiences in general? Here's a scatter plot showing you the relationship between MEQ scores on the x-axis and wise reasoning score on the y-axis. As you can see, we found a positive correlation between general multicultural experiences and wise reasoning. This was statistically significant correlation. As you can see in the top right, you will see the Pearson coefficients, as well as the confidence interval in square brackets. Is multicultural exposure alone related to wisdom? As you can see, we also found a positive correlation, although weaker than the more general scale. And this makes sense because we're measuring exposure alone or isolated. This finding suggests to us that multicultural exposure alone, without having to interact directly, may increase your wisdom. Lastly, is multicultural interaction as well. So in terms of interaction, we see a slightly stronger positive correlation, which makes sense since you're actually having a deeper interaction with people from other cultures. And then foreign travel. For breadth, meaning the number of countries traveled, we found a stronger positive correlation relative to the other variables. But for depth of foreign travel, we found no statistically significant correlation to wisdom. This makes sense. It suggests that a broader perspective, not a deeper foreign experience, may be beneficial for wisdom. Overall, as we expected, we found that multicultural experiences and breadth, but not the depth of foreign travel, are positively related to wise reasoning. Multicultural experiences matter in future studies of wisdom. Immersing individuals in new situations in varied perspectives, these cultural contexts may play an important role in the development of wisdom. Some potential applications include study abroad programs. Universities could emphasize the importance of having these foreign experiences for learning outside of the classroom, outside the city where the university is, so you can tackle challenges more wisely. Everyday efforts that you take will pay off, seeking foreign experiences even from the comfort of your own home. I want to note before we end that this was a correlational study. Future studies could use a longitudinal study design to see if any causal effects exist. Also, our sample was limited to English-speaking individuals in the United States. Although our sample actually included many different racial groups, future studies should investigate these relationships using a more diverse sample. And even in different cultural contexts. Different cultural contexts could be rural or remote areas where maybe there's less multicultural experiences that a person has, or poorer countries where there's less resources and opportunities for travel. In these populations, research could focus on the benefits of what I talked about before, multicultural exposure alone without interaction. An experiment could be run manipulating whether participants are exposed to different cultures or not, and the effect that this has on wise reasoning. Using experimental methods, we could immerse people in these experiences, even online or through virtual reality. But all in all, whether it is traveling, connecting with those from different backgrounds, simply watching foreign movies or shows from your own living room, your efforts to seek these foreign experiences and keep an open mind may indeed make you wiser. Thank you.
Fantastic job, Rodrigo. Great job. Really interesting, really fascinating